Hello, my name's Ian Moore. I conduct a number of walking tours around Sunderland and discuss various aspects of Sunderland's past, and I also have a few illustrated talks about Sunderland's past as well. So maybe I might see you at one of them one of these days. Today I want to discuss something which is relevant to the time of year. I want to talk about Christmas and New Year. I'm sure many of you will be acquainted with Roy Wood and Wizards' "I wish it could be Christmas every day." Well, I think Roy's almost got his wish, because these days you see Christmas trees at the beginning of October and Christmas things are in the shop at least the beginning of September. Personally, it's not my kind of thing. I'll prefer a sense of occasion. I mean, as far as I remember, back in the early 60s when I was 5, 6, 7 years old, Christmas started well into December, maybe around December the 10th. So if you have Christmas almost every day, it's like having your birthday every day. So it's not my kind of thing, but if it makes you happy, fine, go ahead. So where we're standing now is outside Joplin's. Now, if you don't know Joplin's, it was a big department store in John Street. It's been closed since 2010. And like all the big stores, like Blackett's and Bean's and Kennedy's and other places, they had a big sales rush at Christmas time, and they also had a Santa Claus, if my memory serves me right. Now, when I was very small, and I still believed in Santa Claus, my mum would take us down here. I think it was 6p, that's like 2.5p in modern money. And you'd have a look through the fairy grotto, which seemed absolutely fantastic to me. Then you waited in a little queue for your turn to talk to Santa Claus. And I think at the time, I'm sure I believed it was Santa Claus. So he'd sit you on his knee, which I don't think would be allowed these days, and he'd say, "What's your name? And have you been a good boy? And what do you want for Christmas?" No, I can't remember what I said to him. But I do remember a few years later, after Doctor Who had started, we used to get the Brian Mills catalogues, and his kids would leaf through them and say to me, Mum, can we have this for Christmas?" And it was usually something ridiculously expensive. And the thing I always wanted was a Dalek. You could sit inside it and pedal it along, and I don't know how much it cost, or it must have cost a fortune. But needless to say, I never got me Dalek. Now, in the town centre, they'd have Christmas lights, just as they do now, and a big Christmas tree in Mowbray Park, but it wasn't as early as they put them up these days. So a lot of people, when they talk about the past, they seem to remember that it was sunny all the time. But as our family did a lot of camping in the summer, I remember it raining a lot. And as we're talking about the festive season, it certainly snowed much more in the early 60s than it does now. One particular winter, which older people over 70 like me will probably remember, was the winter of 1962, 1963. Now, the snow was on the ground, I think I'm right in saying, for 3 months. And for kids, I was 8 at that time, I thought it was fantastic. We just had a great time making snowmen and snowball fights, and we didn't have sledges or anything, but we'd slide down the bank in Burn Park and have some slides on the ice and stuff like that. All simple, free entertainment. But one thing I do remember, I'm sure we never missed a day at school. It's a bit different in them days. It probably caused a lot of trouble, especially for people who were working on building sites and stuff that wouldn't have been able to work and maybe didn't get paid. So it was difficult for adults, but as little kids we weren't aware of that. And the only way I remember it affecting me personally was that so many football games were postponed, and they were pushed back well into May. We didn't finish the season until May 1963. And we were going for promotion that year, which you may remember. And our last home game, we played Chelsea, and Tommy Harmer, he knocked the ball in, which they described it as off his jockstrap, I seem to recall. Anyway, it went in and we lost 1-0, and it's widely reported that grown men were weeping on the terraces. I was feeling very disconsolate at home. But that's the only way it affected me. And I do recall it was a white Christmas, 1964 and 1965. You can probably get a bet on if it's going to be a white Christmas this year, but I think you'd probably lose. So where we're standing now is the street I was born in, Elmwood Street. If you don't know it, the Royal Infirmary used to be just here till about 30 years ago or whatever. And Burn Park is at the bottom of the street. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about what it was like in my own family and the other kids I knew in this street. Now, Elmwood Street was a great place to grow up in. You didn't think about it at that time because that's all we ever knew, of course. But there was loads of kids. There was one family Well, one house, should I say, up the road had 10 kids in one house. Another house had about 6 kids, and there were 3 of us, and 2 in another family, so there were about 20 kids altogether. So when I was 7, there'd be about 20 of us, ranging from about 6 up to 11. We played all the street games, tiddly-I-go, catchy, kingy, queenie, bottle of poison, Charlie, come and come across the water to wash my mother's clothes, all these kind of things. And we loved the snow and everything. Every different season we enjoyed, down the beach, down the park, whatever we did. Now, as regards me personal circumstances, I was lucky. We were more fortunate than a lot of kids. Both my parents were working in the 1960s, so they could afford to get us some quite nice presents. We'd get one sort of biggish present, like a cowboy suit or something like that for me. And we'd always get a colouring book with a load of crayons and a selection box and a few things like that, and presents from our other relatives as well. So we were really lucky. We always had a great time. Now, I remember my mate up the street, I'll just call him Dave, I won't mention his second name, but he knows who he is. When I was about 7, he took us to one side and said, "Ian, you know that Santa Claus isn't real. It's just your mum and dad. Get you the presents." And I thought, oh no. I was really depressed, like for a day or two. I couldn't believe it. But of course, it's just part of growing up. You have to come to terms with these things. And after that, we'd be looking out. We'd be hunting around to see if our parents had hidden something somewhere. And my big brother Graham, he was good at sniffing anything out. I mean, we only lived in the ground floor of one of these houses behind us. So it was quite hard to hide anything there. But I didn't really want to know, but sometimes my brother would show us what he'd found and that. And we went to bed early on Christmas Eve, and we'd get up on Christmas morning, and our presents would be laid out. Each kid, of course, had their own presents in a little row. It was always a fantastic feeling. And we'd always have a sock, and inside the sock would be a tangerine and a couple of Brazil nuts and things like that. So usually very happy Christmas times when we were kids. We'd have a nice Christmas dinner around about 2 o'clock. And my dad would muck in, peeling a few vegetables and that, but we, as kids, we didn't really do out. And later on, we'd watch stuff on the telly with the same old kind of programs every year. I think, was it called A Spoonful of Sugar? They'd go around hospitals and visit kids who were in hospital on Christmas Day and give them presents and stuff like that. And yeah, later on in the day, we'd all go over to my grandmother's house. She lived at the Wee Chief, and she had a tiny little house, but she had 5 kids and loads of grandkids. And somehow everybody just about would pile into her house for the teas later on. That after I have 2 sittings for the teas, we couldn't get everybody in. So that was always great. But gradually over the years, obviously people died out, and the whole celebration was greatly narrowed down, became very different as I grew up. Now, my dad was always mad keen on New Year's Eve. He had this policy that he'd let all the neighbours in on New Year's Eve. Bit of an open door policy, and they'd stay up all night. Now, as little kids, we had to go to bed early. We were asleep, really. We didn't see anything that was going on. But we'd get up early in the morning and we'd explore this wasteland in our front room. And there'd be empty, half-empty drinks, and we'd sniff everything, maybe drink a little bit out of the glass if there was something left, some beer. I remember one day we found these green things in a jar. They were gherkins, and we had no idea what they were. This was like the height of exotica, eating these gherkins. Anyway, the first New Year's Eve when I stayed up was also in this street. By that time, my grandmother had moved into our house, and we've moved around the corner. So it was New Year's Eve 1966. It was the year we won the World Cup. And Alf Ramsey, the manager of the England team, became Sir Alf, and Bobby Moore got the MBE. And I was a big football fan, I always had been. So this was kind of exciting for the 12-year-old me. And I was allowed to come round my grandma's house with my mum and dad, obviously, my grandparents, and all the aunties and uncles and some cousins. So this was a great honour. And they didn't give us any alcohol. My parents, didn't ply us with drinks or anything like some parents did, maybe. So I was allowed to stay up till just after midnight, and I felt very grown up. I mean, it was a bit boring, really, but I felt pleasant. So after that, I always stayed up for New Year's Eve. And later on, I think the first New Year's Eve I had away from home was 1969. We went to a party. This was the year when we started going to parties after school and stuff like that. So we had a bit of a wild party somewhere in Millfield with a load of schoolmates. And after that, later on, we'd do things like, well, we call it the High Street Shuffle. Some people know it as the ski slope. So if you're not acquainted with the practice, and perhaps it's not good for your health, you'd start off either at the bottom or the top of Hilton Road. We started down High Street West. You try to have a drink in every pub as far as you could go, and theoretically you could go as far as Steele's Club, but we never even got halfway there. So there's about 12 pubs in between. So that's the kind of thing I did in my late teens. And then I moved down London, and really when I first moved to London, New Year was not a big deal. When I was a kid, New Year's Day wasn't even a public holiday in England or Wales, it was in Scotland. So everything we did at New Year's Eve, people in London didn't do, but now it's a big deal, fireworks and all of that. But one thing I loved when I was a kid, and when I came around my grandparents sometimes on New Year's Eve or at home, would always have a first foot. Now people in the south they probably wouldn't know what you meant if you talk about the first foot. So just in case you don't know, now in the old days things are a bit different now. They always chose a man. No reason why it shouldn't be a woman, of course. They tried to choose a tall, dark, handsome man. And what handsome means is your opinion, I suppose. But my dad would do it, or my brother, or one of my uncles, and they'd go outside and they'd wait for midnight. And if you looked out the window, and it was often very cold, of course, on New Year's Eve, you see a load of blokes standing outside these houses, puffing on fags, looking very cold, waiting to hear the church bells. Or something else you heard in Sunderland, you'd hear the sirens on the ships in the river. That was a beautiful sound, like at midnight. So you know it was midnight, you'd knock on the door, and the idea was yours was the first foot into the house, and you want to bring everybody in the house good luck. Now it varies from house to house, people have own traditions, but we always used to have a lump of coal that would provide the heat for your home in the coming year, and we used to take salt and maybe a bit of bread, so for food, so your house would be warm and you'd have food for the rest of the year. And of course, as soon as you got in, they gave you a whiskey, and you'd shake hands with all the lads, all the men, and kiss the women on the cheek. And it was a great honour to be a first foot. I've only ever done it once, actually. In 1983, I had a big argument with my brother, probably the biggest argument we ever had, just around Christmas time. And as a way of making it up, he said, "Ian, will you be the first foot for our house?" And I was really touched, like, that he let us do it. But in London, no, I've never seen anybody do it. If you read Our Woolly and the Bruins, it's a very big thing for them, and they were from the Sunday Post. And incidentally, we usually got an Our Woolly or a Bruins annual for Christmas. Well, here we are on Burn Park Road, which is just around the corner from Elmwood Street. And behind me is what was Burn Park Church, I think it was Burn Park Methodist Church. Now, our family wasn't religious, and none of the kids that I knew in our street, Elmwood Street, were religious either, but all of us went to the Cubs and the Scouts, or the Brownies and the Guides, and a lot of us went to Sunday school as well. And I think really the reason our parents made sure we went, it dawned on me as an adult, they just wanted a bit of peace and quiet to themselves on a Sunday morning, so they knew we'd be at the house for 3 hours, and I can't say I blame them really, because they didn't get much peace. So with the church came a lot of functions. So we'd have Christmas parties here. I remember the Christmas parties were nice, and we had all the usual games and passed a parcel, and I think we all got a little present off the church as well. So some of you may recognise this street. It's Leamington Street, and that's Chester Road at the end. So between the years 1959 and 1965, I went to junior and primary school here, Chester Road School. They'll knock it down in 1981, I think. Now, I mentioned that I was born in Elmwood Street, and a big gang of us kids would walk up here together. So it wasn't so often that my mum was working anywhere, but if she wasn't, she'd sometimes take us. But usually the older kids would take the little kids, and we'd all walk up in a convoy and often come back in a convoy. And I talked about the snow before, and one nice thing about the snow, you could go plodging in all the sludge. And of course I was very small then, so it didn't take much for the sludge to come over the top of your wellies. Oh, and you'd get home, your feet would be really soaking. You have to take your socks off and dry them out. One aspect about wellies, which you may well recall, if you wore short trousers like I did all the time, you got big red welts on the top of your calves and your wellies rubbing against them. But it's something that always brings back that time. So at the school, I mean, Christmas, I always loved Christmas when I was a kid, and nearly everybody else I knew did as well. So we'd have a Christmas party at the school, and we'd have, I think we had little trifles and stuff like that, and play a load of games. But one game which I dreaded, I think it was the Grand Old Duke of York. And the reason for this, the teacher, Miss Gibson, would play the piano. There was no tapes or anything. And all the boys would stand in one line facing all the girls in the other line. And when it came to your turn, I think you had to get hold of the girl opposite, and you go dancing round the end, up to the other end of the column. I knew this was going to happen. I was dreading it. I thought, oh God, how am I going to do this? But when I did it, it was all right, actually. It was over in a flash, and I didn't trip over or anything like that. But one nice aspect of Christmas sticks in my mind. I mean, I'm sure the teachers are just as good as handicrafts these days as they were back then. But a bit like Blue Peter. One year, we all made a little Santa Claus, and what did we make it out of? The cardboard at the centre of a toilet roll, what's left when you're finished. So the teacher said, bring in a cardboard from the toilet roll, and we painted it red, and we painted some white buttons on, and we must have cut out a head and glued that on the top. And the last thing, we had to get some white cotton wool and stick it round Santa Claus's face. And at the end of the week, there was 43 in our class. There was 43 toilet roll Santa Clauses on the shelf waiting to be taken home. And one important thing, you had to put your initials, IM in my case, on the inside to make sure you took the right one home and you didn't nick the best one.